Well, joining us here is Garth Rowswell, the MLA for Vermilion, Lloydminster, Wainwright. Mr. Rowswell, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Now, of course, we are wrapping up the year of 2020. It's been a bit of an interesting year, of course, with COVID, but
Yes.
let's talk about some of the highlights for, from your end with the, from in your constituency for the Vermilion, Lloydminster, Wainwright area. So what are some of those highlights that you want to share with us for 2020 there?
Yeah, well, just from a perspective of getting work done, we passed, or we will have dealt with 58 bills throughout this year, even with the COVID and everything. So we were pretty active. There was a lot of infrastructure money that came out specifically with relaunch and in response to some of the problems that COVID caused. And there was a lot of infrastructure type stuff. But the ones that I'd like to highlight is the Alberta Central East Water Project, and the final tranche of money got approved for that, and that's $34 million to get water over to Paradise Valley, Dewberry, and Clandonald. So that'll be a nice completion of that project. The other one is Lakeland College got $17 million, and that was as a direct result of response to the pandemic. So they're renovating their Mead building, which will make their classrooms for agriculture, human resources, and environmental sciences more productive for them as well. And then locally around Lloyd, there was we got 6.6 million, 2.2 million a year for 3 years going to the Thorpe Center, and the Thorpe Center is almost full, or if not full, it's very close to full. So that was really nice. Like they just had real funding problems, and it was a change on focus from harm reduction to recovery that helped do that. And then we had some more money that we gave to residents in recovery. It kind of fills in a few of the gaps that Thorpe didn't do. So that was addictions and mental health that were being dealt with there. So those are just a few of the highlights that I thought it'd be interesting just to make a point of.
Absolutely. And of course, this year has been very different, of course, as you mentioned, with COVID. What are some, I know we talked to you a while ago about what you've been hearing from the Vermilion, Lloydminster, and Wainwright constituencies and those people there. So what are some things you're still continuing to hear? Because I know there's lots of issues when it comes to, the economy and healthcare and stuff like that. So just touch on maybe what you've been hearing up until since we last spoke.
Well, healthcare, of course, with COVID, it's been just, back in March, you were making decisions the best you could with what you had. The models at that time were suggesting we might face, 30,000 deaths, and so you went after things and did some restrictions on people's movement and being locked down in businesses, and now we're learning as we're going. And one of those changes that was interesting is. The Premier actually said this too. We actually made a mistake by closing down mom and pop shops and keeping the big box stores open for groceries, and it turned out that was a mistake, and that's why we're not doing that at this point. The other thing that happened out of that was of interest was I was on the committee. It was a select special committee. Reviewing the Public Health Act, and it had been amended a few times in the last number of years, but it had never been fully reviewed since 1910. So we took a look at that, and with all the restrictions that we put on because of COVID-19, we got a lot of complaints about civil liberties and people's rights, like how can you do that to us? And so we reviewed it, and that was reflected in some of the changes that are happening. Bill 10 was passed in the spring, and based on the recommendations coming from that committee, we're probably going to repeal Bill 10 this coming spring. And the other one for people that are interested, it was the Public Health Act did from the start have the capability for the government to do mandatory vaccinations. And a recommendation of our committee on that one was to eliminate that and take that out of the Public Health Act. And one of the reasons was Dr. Hinshaw had said, look, it's never been used. I can't see a situation under which we would use it. So, so we said, well, if that's the case, why don't we take it out? And so I think that recommendation is being taken seriously and will probably be dealt with this coming spring. So those are some of the interesting things with regards to that. The other one that's, and this is a bill we're working on right now, is Bill 46, which is the Health Statutes Amendment Act. And it's relative specifically to Lloydminster, because forever there's been a problem with getting information to the hospital and because of the border and all the problems that that's created. So this bill, if it gets passed, will work towards us sharing the information out of province with Saskatchewan, and should solve those problems. I know as soon as I got elected, the mayor brought it to my attention, the seniors group brought it to my attention, and there was a lot of people that were concerned about that and brought that to my attention a number of times. So this health minister has actually done the work to do that, and we're running into resistance from a privacy perspective, but but I expect we'll pass it and we can finally solve this long-term problem that's been happening in Lloydminster.
And lastly, just one of the final points here, Garth, before we wrap things up here. I know earlier in the summer it was announced that, oil and gas companies, will not be property taxed. I know rural municipalities across Alberta have been, feeling that effect, including the county of Vermilion River. So what's the latest forefront on that?
Yeah, that was a fairly hot topic. It was, oil companies were, the way it used to work, they got taxed at a certain level and stayed like that regardless of the productivity of the well. And so it got more and more expensive as the well got less productive. So they wanted that reflected somehow, and so but the impact on the counties, and it was going to be significant. Like over half of the revenue that comes to the county of Vermilion River comes from oil and gas, and down in Wainwright, the MD Wainwright is around 70%. So it's a big deal if these guys stop drilling wells or if it's just not economic for them anymore. So the new minister, when she came in, Minister Lard, really did a great job. And she said, look, for new wells, we'll get a three-year holiday on that, and we're going to reflect a lower tax rate on older wells. So it's a stopgap. We still need to deal with this issue. We need to figure it out on an overall basis. But this bought some time and satisfied the RMA, the AUMA, and the oil companies as well. So I think that was a good trade-off. And from my discussions, the oil companies and the counties and MDs, they're pretty happy about that.
Well, Garth, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us on this recap of 2020, and hopefully 2021 goes better, not only for the province of Alberta, but just for the whole country in general. So thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.